Hello, everyone. Maayong adlaw. Welcome back to the Philippine X and Wellness podcast. I am Cheryl Sampson Ramirez. In honor of Women's History Month, we bring to you Womb Care, Tending and Nurturance, with founder and somatic womb alchemist of Luya Healing and Herbs, Princess Manuel, and our first guest from Dharawal Country, Shellharbour, New South Wales, Australia, Shamanic Womb and Energy Healing Practitioner, Jeanie Smith. Before we jump in, a note on our content. This episode is created for adult audiences only. We advise our viewers and listeners to exercise discretion as we discuss trauma, sexual abuse, and incarceration. It might be a lot to take in, so if you need a breather, take a break or pause the episode before continuing further in order to apply healthy boundaries. Please check the notes on our YouTube channel for more detailed descriptions to avoid sections that may be triggering. Take care of yourself, and if you need to, don't be afraid to reach out and ask for help. We have resources in our Instagram highlights, and hopefully you will find what you need there. Without further ado, we hope that you enjoy this episode.
Hello, everybody. Magandang araw. Welcome to the 10th episode of our 5th season for Philippine X and Wellness podcast. I'm your host, Sheena Katz. For this episode's audio description, currently I am wearing a blue v-neck sweater. My hair is down. I'm seated in front of a white wall with a green plant behind me, and I'm currently streaming from Los Angeles, California. Following our last episode, What's Kapwa in French, with France Stohner, Executive Director for Centre Kapwa and Canada co-lead for Filipina, we bring to you founder and somatic womb alchemist of Luya Healing and Herbs, Princess Manuel, and our first guest from Dharawal Country, Shellharbour, New South Wales, Australia, Shamanic Womb and Energy Healing Practitioner Jeanie Smith, in alignment with Women's History Month. As mentioned in our previous episodes, all views discussed are for informational and educational purposes only. It's not meant to be medical advice, nor does it constitute therapy or professional advice. As always, consult with your health practitioner, especially before starting any exercise or new health program, or a qualified mental health professional for your particular condition. Without further ado, we'd like to welcome to our podcast Princess Manuel and Jeanie Smith. Thank you for being here today. Welcome.
Thank you.
Hi,
Happy to
Sheena,
be here.
Princess, and Filipina community. Thank you for inviting me on. I'm very happy to be here as well.
We are thrilled to have you both on. And we typically like to open our episodes with getting to know where our guests are from. So, can you both please inform our community where are both sides of your families from and where are you currently streaming from at this moment?
Sure, I could start. So first, I forgot to say Happy Women's Month to all the listeners, and I'd also like to give a shout out to all the women who are resistors, healers, caretakers, nurses, cultural bearers, and so much more that uphold our communities, may have given their lives, and that have paved the way for us to be here to share our voices and stories, especially in this time of erasure, fear mongering, and revision of our history. And so, with that, I am currently streaming from the lands of Gabrielino, the Tongva people, and now also known as Torrance, California. Today, I'm also bringing with me my ancestors who have been guiding me in this work. I come from lineages of nurses, activists, political figures, carpenters, farmers, and traditional healers. My mom is Ilocano, from Ibong Villaverde in Nueva Vizcaya. Her father is from La Union, and her mother was from Cabanatuan in Nueva Ecija. My father is Tagalog and from Manila. His father was from San Jose, Nueva Ecija, and his mother was from Cebu City. All of my grandparents and my father are now ancestors. Whenever I do these talks, I also like to bring in some of the plants and animal allies I've been working with specific to the womb for today. So the rose and ilang ilang, and then the black panther and the blue whale as animal spirits who support us in navigating the depths of healing through generational and present day trauma and the beauty and fertile darkness that it comes with. For the communities living with certain disabilities, I'm wearing a multicolored pink, white, blue, I think some purple scarf with a wooden brown background. My hair is down or partly down. Thank you again, Filipina X Wellness Podcast, for having me and for offering the space.
And on to you, Jeanie.
Thank you. I am streaming today from Shellharbour, New South Wales, Australia, known by the traditional owners and First Peoples of the land as Dharawal Country. I pay my respects to the elders past, present, and emerging, and acknowledge that I live and practice on Aboriginal ancestral earth and skies and waters that were never ceded. It always was and always will be Aboriginal land. My pronouns are she, her. I have brown eyes, long brown hair. I'm wearing a pink, white, and green dress with a carnelian necklace and a white background. Now, for me, in terms of maternal lineage, my mama was born and raised in Santa Cruz, Manila, self-proclaimed city girl. My Lola was born in General Santos, South Cotabato, and my great Lola was born in Argao, Cebu. My Lola side of the family is from Manila and Pampanga, and my dad was born and raised actually in Ballymena, Northern Ireland, in the province of Ulster. And yeah, equally proud of both of my cultures and all of the gifts that have been given to me from both sides, and very proud of both of those histories of resistance as well.
Well, welcome to you both. And Princess, I don't think we talked about this, but my dad is from La Union, so we'll have to chat more about that later. Did not know that we had that in common. Well, thank you both again. This is really exciting to have you both on. And Jeanie, our very first guest from Oceania, 2026 is really all about expanding our global reach to capture the voices across our diaspora. So this is super exciting. And let's actually open up this episode with learning a little bit more about the Filipinos in that area of the world. Gina, can you let us know or let us in on the Filipino community in Australia? Are most of them in New South Wales? We know about the Cheat Coders podcast, but beyond that, there's not much that I know about it.
Shout out to any FilAuzzies tuning in. Feel free to connect. And yes, most of the Filipino population in Australia do reside in New South Wales. I would say the highest concentrations are obviously in our capital cities because that's where most of the work opportunities are. But there's definitely our folks in, small regional towns as well that feel really important skill gaps. But where I'm from, even being a large coastal city, there was only 2 to 3 other Philo kids in my grade at any one time. It was a predominantly white and European community where I grew up. And, we did have a local Filipino association where we would attend fundraisers and dances and pageants. And my mom obviously has Filipino friends from church. But I'll be honest, I think my exposure to Filipino community here is probably skewed because I don't have any family here outside of my parents and siblings. So no cousins, grandparents, aunties, uncles. They're all back home or spread throughout the diaspora. And I do feel like that was something we missed out a lot on growing up. And it's something I've yearned for and grieved really deeply as I've gotten older. And yeah, that's why learning and remembering and reclaiming our culture is really important to me. I'm aware of, different Filipinx activist groups and traditional dance groups here and things like that. But again, it's only in the major cities.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, that must have been a very skewed upbringing, like you mentioned, having two or three at each grade. And did you all know each other?
Yeah, yeah. Of course. Yeah.
Just making sure.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So now that we know a little bit more about some of the Filipinos in Australia, let's dive right into our topic at hand, which is womb care, tending, and nurturance. And Jeannie, you actually helped us title this episode. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that entails?
Absolutely. Womb care to me, and there's many different definitions, but it's synonymous with women's health, but through a more holistic and spiritual lens rather than a medical lens. Both have their place, of course. And even though no matter how one identifies, or even after, procedures like a hysterectomy, everyone has an energetic womb space, and womb care encapsulates that, the feminine hormone driven and energetic experiences that we have all the way through, first menarche, our menstrual health, our fertility, pregnancies, births, postpartum, menopause, and beyond. And it also offers sort of alternative treatment for gynecological conditions such as PCOS, endometriosis, fibroids, etc. And we're also looking at, like if a woman is experiencing these things, womb care might ask, what is your environment like? What wounds do you carry? What are you experiencing in your relationships? And what else is going on for you emotionally that might have an impact on your body? Um, all cultures would have their own history of womb care rooted in traditional midwifery practices, and of course, as we do in our culture. So it's not new knowledge whatsoever. It's just wisdom that's being remembered. Um, in a world where women's health has been increasingly pathologized. Joanna Galvez spoke about that in relation to birth keeping and midwifery in your Malaya midwifery episode. And it's an awareness and an education of how important and crucial our pelvic health, our menstrual health is to our overall well-being and functioning as women. And it's something we're not necessarily taught at schools. It's not necessarily something we're even taught by our elders. And our wombs, they're a very receptive organ, and they can hold imprints and patterns of so many things: stress, trauma, ancestral wounding, but equally, they are also the seat of our power and our creation and our intuition. And our womb spaces deserve tending and nurturance for all the ways that they support us, support humanity, and support new life.
Thank you so much for that insight. And you're absolutely right. We certainly did not learn that in school and not from our elders either. So that's super helpful. And Princess, you are a somatic womb alchemist. Tell us a little bit more about what that is and what services you provide as it relates to womb care.
For sure. Well, first, thank you so much, Jeannie, for explaining that so beautifully. I forgot to mention earlier my pronouns are she, her, they, them. So this morning, I actually engaged in prayer and ancestral guidance, and my Lola Remedios came in and said to talk about love. And a few days ago, I was near the ocean waters here and received a download to talk about the truth. And so I was like, okay, how can I kind of blend all of that together and talk about what somatic womb alchemy is? And so for today, for the listeners, I invite you to take a deep breath and see if any of this resonates with you. And throughout any of this talk, please take care of yourself and please pause if you need to. We might talk about some things that could bring up some triggers for you. So I'll talk about the truth before we get into love and what somatic womb alchemy is. So we have lived through generations of trauma and are currently re-experiencing it today. We as Filipinos have disconnection from our bodies, from the sacred lands we are on, from our traditional healing practices, cultural invisibility. We experience continued misogyny and violence to our bodies, our psyches, and our spirit. We experience fragmentation within ourselves and communities. We experience erasure, a feeling of not being safe as targets of xenophobia, racism, sexism. This idea of being imposters and lack of confidence in our own skills. So these are some of the truth and the symptoms of these oppressive interweaving systems and common themes I see as I hold space for my clients. So now about love. Okay, so this is where somatic womb alchemy comes in. My teacher, Naomi Amaya Love, who is now in Colorado, she taught us that the womb is a hollow, suspensory detoxification organ that moves in and out of optimal position and is located at the center of our pelvic bowl. And similar to what Jeanie was saying, what happens, right, in these hollow, empty spaces, they get filled with undigested experiences, emotions, and traumas, and some of the things I mentioned earlier. So, and again, as we know, this is because our society we live in has taught us to pull ourselves up by our bootstrap, to keep producing, to keep grinding. It's also due to the fact that people like my mother had to keep working to survive as a nurse. So there's actually no time to really slow down to digest and process all of these experiences. And furthermore, as my teacher said, many of us have trauma responses that have been built into our system as overriding our needs, overriding our messages. And when we've lived a life of overriding ourselves, our body is, many ways learns to not trust ourselves, right? Because we don't listen to our body anymore. And the more it is challenging to trust our intuition, right? Trust our inner guidance. And then that manifests into us not trusting others too, right? So as within, so without. So for those of you listening, how many of you had that internal subtle message that was like, set that boundary, right? And instead we didn't for some reason. I know I have. I know it's something I continue to work on in this healing journey. But here's where the somatic womb alchemy comes in, right? This is where love comes in, especially if we were never taught that because of these systems, right? We were taught to not love ourselves. The colonizers pillaged our ancestors' villages, burned our sacred tools, taught us to hate ourselves. As Bell Hooks says, love is an action. So somatic womb alchemy, I know that was a lot before I get to what it is. It's the love action, right? It's the process of really slowing down to notice the patterns, to listen, and then eventually alchemize the trauma by holistically addressing any emotional, psychological, physical, and spiritual aspects of the self. It's the process of learning to love yourself again if you never knew how to before. And in the healing arts, as I mentioned, as within, so without. So when you learn how to do this, you can then verbalize to others how you want to be loved, how you want to be touched, how you want to be talked to. You learn what is resonant or not. You learn what it feels like to be in complete alignment. And when you have taken on others' energies, you learn when your metaphoric internal rivers have been filled with sludge and what you need to do to clear and nourish those rivers for flow and abundance, which is something I learned from one of my favorite books and I consider it a Bible, Women Who Run with the Wolves by Dr. Clarissa Pinkola Estes.
Princess, thank you so much for that holistic view. It really deeply resonated with me, and I'm sure that a lot of our listeners too when you break it down in that way. So we appreciate it. And Jeanie, you are a shamanic womb and energy healing practitioner. Tell us a little bit more about your title, and similarly to what Princess described, what services do you typically provide to your clients?
Absolutely. And thank you so much, Princess, for all of those beautiful, potent words. Yeah, you put it into words better than I ever could. So thank you. For me, so I'll start with the shamanic part. A shamanic practitioner is deeply attuned and invites in elements of nature and spirit and ancestors and the intersection and the interwovenness of those things. And that's everything from plants to animals to humans, earth, air, fire, water, all that has gone before, all that is present, all that is to come. And really the understanding that life is more of a spiral of experiences than a linear path that, typically we are told to walk on. My shamanic training is actually in the Irish Celtic tradition and the Wheel of the Year from my father's side. But the shamanic path really, the values, the beliefs, and the practices at times are quite universal, and they really share a lot of similarities the world over. And I also have training in womb and abdominal massage, Reiki, the traditional Mexican partera tradition of closing of the bones, and other sort of rebozo work and holistic lifting face massage as well. But my signature offering is womb healing, and that is through the massage and the body work in a very ceremonial and devotional style. Um, you know, echoing what Princess said, it's about love. It's about infusing that love back into someone's body. Self-love, love from me, love from the ancestors, and really filling the womb up and the body up with light, and not in a love and light way, but really just bringing back some of that goodness that has been fragmented along the way because of our experiences. And yeah, so just infusing all of those sort of streams of knowledge together. And I am also a women's circle facilitator. So I do run in-person circles in my local community. And I also offer postpartum bodywork home visits to new mamas, because obviously it's hard for them to get out of the house, and you really want to sort of foster that mama baby connection, and you don't really want them to be away from each other too much. So yeah, that's about it in a nutshell.
And let's dig in a little bit deeper and actually dial it back to your origin stories. Who or what inspired you both to focus on womb care, and what was your journey that paved the way to your current practice today? We'll start with you, Princess, and followed by Jeannie.
Sure. So, Jeannie, thank you for sharing that. You are such a powerful, healer in your community, and I truly believe that every community, every family needs a healer. And so I guess with my origin story, I'll continue with love. Uh, I didn't know. I thought I knew what love was, like when I was younger, and then after going through this healing journey, I realized, like, oh, that wasn't love. Yeah. So I'm a survivor of complex PTSD, generational traumas. I've witnessed violence in the home and have had violence inflicted upon me sexually, physically, emotionally, and mentally. I also witnessed it in my community to many of the women around me, and also so much violence also towards the men too in my highly policed community. So who in turn also inflicted their systematic and frustrations in the home and to their female partners. I grew up in Carson, California, which is considered a dense suburban city with some urban characteristics. Uh, the city is a mix of residential neighborhoods and also industrial zones, so high pollution from oil refineries, damaging Earth Mother, and experiencing underfunded education. So Carson, where I'm from, has a diverse community of people of color, immigrants, and working class folks, stressed out people, and I had the privilege to have access to education as my escape from traumatic experience. I went into overdrive and was like, I'm going to be a straight A student, and I really want to leave my home, which caused me so much hurt and pain. I want to leave this community. Later, I learned escape, is a symptom of trauma. It's part of flight, right? And so while in high school, I received a letter saying that I had been admitted into Cal UC Berkeley. Some of you may know the stereotype of Berkeley as like that's, where all the activists are, which is true for me, at least. So there I studied the real history of people of color with ethnic studies, how U.S. imperialism strikes different lands in order to plumage resources, create certain immigration policies to ultimately benefit the 1%, pit communities against each other, and then shuts out those certain communities with xenophobic immigration policies when they're done exploiting them, right? So we're seeing this now in ICE in our communities. So I also studied sociology and the interlocking political, economic, and sociocultural ideologies that further marginalize people of color. And so I'm talking about all of this as a background of like, oh, the collective traumas that we experience in our cosmic womb space. And so at Berkeley, that's when I became, a feminist and a community organizer. And I've been organizing for 15 plus years. And so that's when I actually started the womb healing, right? I wanted to end violence against women, violence against the earth, and the taking of the resources, and understanding what was happening to my community. So even during this time I was learning about violence, I was still in my unhealed patterns. I was still overriding myself, being in relationships that were toxic and unhealthy. I even ended up in jail for a few days for defending myself against an abusive person. And so, as you know, the incarceration systems are not built to support survivors. In fact, they incarcerate them. And so in these relationships, I always heard this internal voice to go. My homegirls were fed up with me. Some of them even abandoned me and in my time of need because they didn't know how to support survivors. But in fact, I learned later on, my body learned to dissociate, right? And I couldn't leave the situation because I literally would forget, right? My body would dissociate. My soul, parts of my soul would like leave my body. I was in a victimized and helpless state, repeating patterns of women before me. And, I had so many codependency tendencies. I blamed everyone, which was partly true, right? Like when we're in our healing, we go to those places of anger sometimes. But then later on, as I went through the healing, I had to look at, well, what was my responsibility to stop these patterns? So then I went to grad school to do social work and like, okay, now how do I heal these systems? And so I learned how to heal more on a psychological level, which I consider more of like the air archetype when we talk about the elements. I became a mental health clinician because I was also helped by wonderful therapists. So in grad school, I had an internship to go into the jails in Rikers Island in New York to kind of help my clients once they come back into the community. And every time I go, the bars would lock behind me. I would be triggered. And so I was like, wow, I can't be in this internship and triggered all the time. Like, I don't know what's happening to me. And so that's when I started going into mental health therapy. And that's when I went deep into the shadows of the womb healing journey, deep into, whoa, this is not just me being triggered in jail. This is me like, whoa, all of these relationships, all these patterns. Look at my, my parents, my community. And so during that time, I learned about Soul Fire Farm while I was in grad school, and they had this like week-long Black and Latinx farmers immersion program. That's what it was called at the time. And I was waitlisted for like a year or two, and eventually they reached out to me. And when I was there, that was the first time I had like touched the earth intentionally and learned how to plant things. I learned later that my ancestors were actually farmers, as I mentioned earlier. And earlier I was talking to my mom and I asked her, what did we plant? Right. And she said, we planted coffee, cacao, corn, bananas, camote, coconut, tobacco, and rice. And so, it was really powerful. And even when my dad passed away a few years ago, I did a ceremony where I offered tobacco, right, which supported him to be a well ancestor. Like the tobacco plant spirit supported that, especially because it was also in his family. And so from Soul Fire Farm, I got interested in plants, and elders recommended me to apprentice with master herbalist Karen Rose of Sacred Vibes Apothecary in Brooklyn. And there she really taught me the indigenous framework of working with plants, which is a process that includes respecting the land, asking permission before just taking a plant, which is, counter to the way that plants are treated now, which is like we're just going to take en masse and without reverence to the plants, right? Without reverence to the land. And then during this time, I learned how to walk spiritually with a plant. And the plant that came to me was ginger, hence the name of my business, Luya Healing and Herbs. And this plant really taught me, it's a heating plant. So it really, like an onion, like it peels through the layers of generational traumas and shows you what's there. And during this apprenticeship, we learned about herbs that can support the womb, such as red raspberry leaf, vitex, red clover. And for the listeners, I would use caution, right? Don't just use these herbs. Do your research or talk to your local herbalist. Contact me if you need to, because there could be contraindications, especially if you're pregnant. And so during our graduation ceremony, Karen Rose, there's a ceremony of us and other herbalists that are graduating. And she says, all of the traumas you experience is a part of your journey and medicine in the world, which I think is true for many people in the healing arts. And she said, you have a lot of ancestors and you have a lot of work to do here. You're a shaman. And so that was when I was initiated, right? Unfortunately, because of colonization, I wasn't connected to my lineage. And so I had to figure it out on my own. And then I went on my first ancestral journey with Lyn Pacificar of Herbalaria. And then ever since then, I've been able to visit the ancestral lands on my own, right? Like doing my own ceremony. So fast forward to the womb. So all of this is kind of like leading there. I was like, oh, I want to learn more about the healing arts. Wow, there's so much to this traditional arts. I went to this bookstore in New York. I forgot what it's called now. But then there was this book called Sacred Woman by Queen Afua. I'm sure some of you may know. And then I had a book club, or like women's healing circle. And this is the first time me and other women really got to process how we've learned to hate our moon cycle. Even though when you're around other women, all our moon cycles sync up, which, tells you there's something powerful about this and our connection to the moon and each other, right? But we've been ashamed to those powers. And so again, the power of telling the truth in circle. And then after that, another healing arts practitioner, Sockie Laya Smith, she's a nurse in New York. She recommended Naomi Love, who I referenced earlier. So I went to Naomi Love's womb healing retreat. She taught me about codependency tendencies, and I was like, wow, this really resonated with me. So I apprenticed with her for a few years in her womb temple apprenticeship, where we got to really apprentice with our own womb, the cosmic womb, the helping spirits. And then I learned later how to facilitate this healing for others. And a part of this also, while I was in New York, there was, again, more, even if we're healing through traumas, we're still constantly bombarded with more harms from these systems, right? So while I was there was like a lot of anti-Asian violent crimes, right? COVID was happening. I'm not sure if you heard of some of the murders that were happening to different Asians in the community. And so I was like, okay, I have to learn self-defense. So then I started learning Filipino martial arts with Chrysalis Kali Collective. And I've been practicing now for 6 years in Muay Thai, boxing, Silat, and doing the womb healing actually further helped me step into that power, right? Jeanie mentioned earlier, this is our place of power. And so how many of you know of protected mothers, right, of their children, of their creative projects? And so I feel like that comes from our sacred womb, right, which is connected to all our foremothers. Most recently, I learned Ablon Hilot from Virgil Mayor Apostle. He's the author of, some of you may know, The Way of the Ancient Healer. So he really taught me the connection between the combat and the healing arts. And he taught me about like the body is the earth, and like the earth, how to tend to its fertile soil by digging into it and tending to the urat for more flow. And so he also taught me how different Filipino martial arts movements can be translated into different healing postures. So again, like learning from an indigenous framework from his region in the Ilocos region. And so, growing up, I would also, as part of the womb healing, I would go to the ocean a lot. Like for me, I feel like that's like the womb of the earth. And most recently, I started to learn how to surf with Intersection Surf here in LA. And I had such a fear of surfing. I would go out there and literally freeze. But then when I went out there, paddled out, like I felt like I healed some mother wombs, just like working with those fears. So that was a long story, but I just wanted to share, like, the healing the healing of your womb is a beautiful journey, and it supports you to integrate all parts of yourself. It's deeply transformational, and yeah, also to exemplify, like, the healing isn't linear and it's not individualistic. Like, as I talked about, I had so many people help me along the way, and once you start that path, so many doors open up to you, and you might even find your calling and your soul tribe in that path.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing that incredible journey with us. And I love that you mentioned that healing isn't linear, because even though we know that deep down, I feel like we often forget. So that's super helpful to remind our viewers. And Jeanie, on to you. Tell us more about your origin story.
Before I do that, yeah, I just want to thank Princess for sharing again. I really brought emotion to me hearing your story, and I just wanted to say to your listeners that, you know, emotion and tears, I'm such a big advocate for that, and not stifling it, not stagnating it, because that is very unhealthy for your womb. So, just a little reminder to everyone, just to let it out whenever you need to. Embrace it, embrace tears, don't be afraid to cry. Um, I I cry so many times when people are on the table with me, my clients, when they're talking to me, and I think that they appreciate that, right? I'm human, and their stories are obviously touching me, and we need more of that humanity in the world and seeing each other in that way. So just a little reminder to everyone. But for me, my origin story, I've always I would say I've always been quite spiritual, but obviously, you know, with everything else, colonization and everything, like you said, being severed from culture, not growing up on the land of my ancestors, all of that sort of thing, you pick little bits and pieces from other facets of spirituality and didn't really deep dive into it until sort of my late 20s. Very long story short, my husband was diagnosed with stage 4 bowel cancer when we were both only 27 years old. Happy to report, after almost 7 years and 40 plus rounds of chemo, many surgeries later, he is stronger than ever. But that was huge, for people of our age, as you can imagine. It awakened so much in me, and it made me reassess and question everything, what really mattered, where I wanted my energy to go, how short life is, and it really deepened my resolve and my spirituality. And I was becoming, more interested in ancestry and genealogy and epigenetics, and found out more about the Helot and folk healers in both of my lineages. So yeah, sort of deep diving into that was definitely part of it as well. And then for me physically, during all of this happening, I was working 2 jobs to hold us down whilst my husband couldn't work. I was caring for him, advocating for him, doing all of the appointments back and forth from hospital. I was studying, and I was trying to be a martyr, and I was not accepting help. I was not looking after myself, and my menstrual health really suffered, and I started missing periods quite regularly. I was having really irregular cycles. I think the longest cycle I had was over 200 days without a bleed, um, which is crazy. So I started really deep diving into holistic ways of healing my cycle, and that led me to womb and abdominal massage training. And the first time I, palpated that womb space and I felt a womb under my hands. It was a beautiful woman who was just about to bleed, so her uterus was very full and ripe and prominent. And feeling that under my hands felt like a homecoming. And it felt like I had done that so many times before, even though I hadn't. And yeah, I realized from feedback during that time when I was doing all of my case studies and practicing on people that I did have this gift of healing hands. And in addition to all of that, I was becoming really hyper aware of how common fertility issues are in modern women, how common miscarriage and pregnancy losses are, and also the lack of support that women receive in postpartum care, and the culture around that. So those are, all of those really big driving factors for my purpose and practice today.
And now, speaking of your practice today, tell us a little bit more about that. Who typically are your clients, and do you usually provide services in person or virtually? Let's start with you, Jeanie, and then we'll follow it up with Princess.
Mhm. My beautiful clients are women from all seasons of life, so far ranging from as young as 18 to mid 60s. However, most of my clientele are in their 20s and 30s, the most common childbearing years. And these are the years that we're really hardwired to consider our womb health because, we're searching for support with perhaps preconception, fertility, both birth and postpartum. Womb health is important at any stage and age, though, even if you've stopped bleeding. Many of my clients, they've had fertility issues, they've had pregnancy losses, they've had traumatic births. So they're seeking holistic support that has both an emotional and a spiritual aspect to it as well. Um, they want to feel nurtured and looked after through these difficult life experiences and these transitions. And, you know, they want to have that couple of hours where they feel like they're the only person on earth that I care about, which is true. And they deserve that. And that's what I aim to gift them. Majority of my services are in person. So I love that, tangible and tactile feeling of presence. It is so powerful and nurturing for the woman to do that one on one. And I would never say that the space is safe, but I'm hoping that that's what's created. Um, but I do offer some virtual work through sort of online one on one womb and energy and shamanic healing. And yeah, I would love to open it up to sort of more virtual offerings further down the track.
Very cool. And on to you, Princess. Can you tell us more about your clients, and do your services usually, include both in person and virtually, or just one or the other?
Yeah, sure. So I tend to attract clients who want to heal through trauma, unhealed toxic relational patterns, healing through those codependency tendencies, and folks who want to find, what their unique creative path is. Um, so I tend to get clients who are early 20s to early 40s. I do both virtual and in person depending on the service. I guess in terms of my practice, uh, earlier I mentioned that healing the womb means alchemizing trauma holistically, right? Emotionally, psychologically, physically, spiritually. And so in my practice, I address each of those factors and engage with the different elements within those realms. So what that looks like is if I'm meeting with a client and, in this particular session, they want to delve deeper, like emotionally, psychologically, we may track kind of like the stories that they're told or the stories they tell themselves, right? Like there's that saying where attention goes, energy flows. So we're really tracking the triggers, right? What happens before, what happens in the moment, and what happens after. I mentioned earlier, right? Like tending to the womb means actually slowing down. So I teach clients, like, what does it mean to really slow down, to observe without judgment, to really listen to yourself or the parts of yourself, to dialogue, right? And then really see what those parts need. And then I advise my clients, like, okay, and then give yourself that need, right? That's how you build internal trust and start, instead of overriding ourselves, right? Which causes further disconnect and further mistrust in yourself, where you don't know how to make decisions because you don't have that internal trust. And this is really challenging work, right? This is where we're going into the shadows. We're bringing patterns to the light to be eventually transformed, right? This is where I find a lot of resistance for folks. There might be some grief of having to relive old things where they never had the ability to feel that grief, right? Because they had to keep going. And so this is especially healing for like generational traumas that are passed down, where we were never able to tell the truth, right? Women were taught to just keep it within themselves and, just keep going, keep taking care of your communities. And so I mentioned earlier, I like to work with the elements. So with the archetype of air, I might provide different journal prompts to people, right, to reflect and then give themselves like affirmations to try something new. Sometimes clients, they might address shame and guilt associated with pleasure, sensuality, right? Especially if you come from certain, religious backgrounds, right? Like it's shameful to do certain things, shameful to touch yourself. And so we may also track like what gives a client their life, like what makes them feel lively and excitement, and to follow that, but also work with the fear and resistance, right? So that's just the emotional and psychological aspects of it, right? That helps us tend to the shadows and the stored traumas. And then we also like to engage spiritually and energetically. I mentioned earlier that, I like to engage in shamanic practices, and I didn't mention all of my healing arts teachers, but something I learned through was also how to facilitate ritual and ceremony in a safe way. So during my practice with my clients, we will hold like ceremony. What does it mean to set the intention? All the different elements that are a part of that, but how to do it in a safe way and how to close that container in a safe way as well. And so a part of the energetic hygiene practices, especially if some of the listeners are service providers, it's very important to have energetic hygiene, right? You don't want to take whatever is from the client into the next session, right? You always want to be attuned to your own energetic signature. You always want to be aware, like, what is mine, what's not mine. And so some energetic hygiene practices could look like smudging yourself, right? There's just as one example of so many, right? Using the element of like air and fire. And so with smudging, like hopefully folks do the research and not use endangered plants. Again, like being mindful and respectful of the plants. And so I might also suggest like womb steams or herbal teas, herbal baths with particular herbs in terms of the water element. And in terms of healing the womb physically, I will support clients again in like tracking. Like I'm all about tracking, right? Like we need to know and track things in order to see what's going on. And like similar to Jeanie, my periods were like they weren't consistent. Sometimes I would go a few months without having one. This is when I was younger and I was in traumatizing situations, right? My body was literally telling me something, but I didn't have a chance to listen. And so physically, I support clients in tracking their symptoms, their menstrual cycles, if they have one, and then associated with the natural season of the sun, stars, and moon. So like in connection with the new moon or the full moon, what's going on and what's going on in your internal seasons. Like I like to say, like, if you have a moon cycle, it represents the different seasons. Like, what does the internal fall look like, right? The shedding, right? What does the winter look like, where it's like, I just want to be in a cave. I don't want to be outside, right? I don't want to interact with people. They annoy me, right? My internal summer, I'm like, oh, I have so much energy, right? And then spring, it's like, oh, new beginnings internally. And we feel that, right? That's how we're connected with the seasons. And so we track all of those things. We may recommend different herbs to be ingested physically, right? So herbal teas. And again, not all herbs are the same, nor do they work the same on every body, because we all have different body constitutions. And there could be contraindications for one person, but another person it's completely okay. And especially if someone is taking medication. And so a part of the physical practice of healing the womb is also similar to Jeanie, like doing the actual like body work. So for me, I facilitate self-applied womb and breast massage. So I teach, women, womb carriers, however some folks identify themselves, like how to connect like the womb, the breast with like the heart space, right? And then a little bit of like the abdominal massage and then down into the womb. And I like to do like first facilitate self-applied because some of the clients I've worked with have never touched their own womb. They don't even know where it is, right? And so I've learned in my practice, like as mentioned, the womb gets out of optimal alignment, so it goes in different directions. And how do you coax it back into alignment? And so the womb, it's also covered by different systems of flow, the circulatory, lymphatic, energetic. And so when you're doing these massages throughout, it supports that flow throughout your entire body. So some folks think, oh, that doesn't impact other body systems. Like, no, it affects the entire body. And so just to summarize, because I've said a lot, my healing practice involves blending different elements of nature, addressing the emotional, psychological, spiritual, energetic, physical, and then using the different elements in all of that. It's holistic and transformative, and it's very unique to each person, which is why I like to do individual sessions first to get that assessment of that person, their traumatic background, what medications they're taking. There's so much to the assessment, but yeah, so yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Absolutely. And do you typically do in person or virtual or both?
I do both, depending, yeah, it depends on the service.
Gotcha. And then diving in a little bit deeper into both of your practices, having done what you do for as long as you have, do you have any memorable stories that you could share with us from your practices so far? We'll start with you, Jeannie, then move on to Princess.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the core story for me is actually my mum. Um, I know she won't mind me sharing. She was the first person I practiced on outside of my training. And, we'd always had, you know, one of those classic mother-daughter relationships where we're both quite stubborn and hard-headed and we're both very opinionated and we butted heads a lot when I was growing up. And it was so amazing. She is my most talkative client. She's come back many times since, but she she just completely opened up to me whilst I was massaging her womb about life, about, her first menarche and experiences around that. My Lola was like my mum was a tomboy and she was always, playing in the street with all her friends, and my Lola was like, "Oh, well, now you can't be friends with boys anymore." And, my mum was like, I don't understand. Why is that?" And, it wasn't really spoken about much further than that. And, she said something really profound during as well. She got very emotional, and because my Lolo, he practiced bone setting and people would come to him to have their necks and backs cracked and all of that sort of thing. She said that she felt like I was the one that he had passed the healing powers on to, and that was really emotional for us both, for her to say that, and it was very affirming for me, of course. And that first massage and all of the ones that I've had with her since has been completely life-changing for our mother-daughter dynamic because, you know, I was holding this womb in my hands that birthed me and birthed my three siblings and carried us and grew us. And, we finally saw each other as women and equals, and I feel like it helped me. I knew her stories, but it helped me understand and almost like brought a curtain down between us where I saw her almost as a young woman And she saw me as this now, older woman that is independent, and I had to always been independent, but I'm good. I'm good. I turned out okay. I'm helping other people in the best way that I can. And, we just got each other. And that was, yeah, that was really beautiful and profound for me. And it really has sort of like shifted even just our communication and things like that going forward, which has been really nice. And it's a very unexpected way for that to happen, because it was almost like a form of therapy for both of us. Like during sessions, I get into a really meditative and trance-like state, and yeah, I feel like there was a lot through our maternal lineage and that red thread that we share that was really transmuted there. So yeah, that was the most memorable story for me.
Wow, that's incredible that a session kind of opened up the therapy pathways and, you know, that conversation and understanding that you probably wouldn't have had you not had that session with her. So that's very cool. And what about you, Princess? Any memorable stories from your practice that you can share with us?
Yeah, I think recently, so I was studying with Ka Virgil and in the studio, and it was me and my cohort. We call ourselves the Utot cohort. And we argue and joke that we're the best cohort of Ka Virgil's students. And anyway, it was such a powerful portal to be studying under Ka Virgil. So one day we were, I just love that cohort. It didn't even feel like studying. There would be moments of seriousness, but there was a lot of laughs and joking. But anyway, so we had this like party that was happening outside. In one of my cohort members, JJ, was cooking with my other cohort member, Charmaine. Miko was doing a shamanic session in the studio, and I was doing I was doing like a blend of ceremony and Ablon Hilot and womb massage. And then Ka Virgil was in the other room, like writing his book, I think. And so I'm remembering that because I feel like that's how healing should be. Like it's such a beautiful memory to heal in community and to be received in community after that. And so I've had other sessions where, as I mentioned, clients sometimes have never touched their own womb in an intentional way. And when they do it for the first time, they start to cry, or I support a client do like a womb steam to clear the energy of past lovers, and they like reach out to me like I feel like a brand new person the next day. So it's just so profound to do this healing work. But I also love the type of healing art that it is. Like it's so community oriented, right? And the community while you're doing the healing work is so loving. And so yeah, it's like I love what I do. I love the community. I love, like the frequency of this healing art. And so, yeah.
I love the community aspect. It doesn't even sound like you guys were doing a class or learning. It sounds like just hanging out. And so now diving right into your practices and the services that you provide, what are some of the costs of your sessions with clients? I'm curious, do you offer group work, workshops, or retreats, or is it more single or multiple sessions? I'm sure our listeners would love to know how long do your sessions typically run, all the logistics that kind of comes with your services. Let's start with Jeannie, then we'll move on to Princess.
Yeah, so for my services, depending on the length, the modality, and the medium of the session, it varies. The cost varies from like 110 to 190 Australian dollars, which is roughly 80 to 140 US dollars. My signature woman healing body work is a long session. It's up to 2.5 hours because we intentionally spend time talking at the beginning and the end of the session, off the table. So that beginning is really to bring ease and comfort and warmth before touch is even applied, and just an understanding and a trust between us. And also so that I can sort of observe and read the person's energy and needs, and to really understand what they're desiring to feel afterward, what their intention is for the session, and what they want to feel. And at the end, we talk quite a lot as well, because we need that time to debrief about any phrases, visions, messages that come from the body or outside of the body. We want to discuss aftercare advice. This is not a kind of body work or massage where you come in, you're on the table, and you're out. We very intentionally have a lot of time and space around that. And for the packages that I do with postpartum home visits, it's very intentionally, it's only a 30-minute visit. Like I mentioned before, we want that mama baby proximity. We want her to be able to have baby on chest feeding, or cuddling if needed. So I usually do 3 times 30 minutes in that package, but that can be adjusted to whatever the needs or wants of the family is. And the closing of the bone ceremony, because that is a 4-part ritual, which is the body work, it's the ritual bath, it's steaming under hot blankets and towels, and then doing the rebozo wrapping at the end, and that part of the ceremonial thing that takes 4 to 5 hours. So that's a pretty long half day type thing. And yeah, in terms of group work, I haven't done any virtual group work yet, but it's something that I would love to dive into eventually. I do the odd workshop and women's circles as well. So every now and then I will run a circle based on a different theme. So maybe the red thread, or sister wounds into sisterhood, divine union, whatever piques interest at the time. And yeah, in terms of my womb healing work, some people come for a single session for the intention of, I want to, you know, I want to close this traumatic birth energetically. Or for other people that want more of the physical benefits of womb healing, they might come to me every month, because they really see the benefits of how that changes their bleed, how it reduces the pain around their cycle, how it makes it more regular for people that have had fibroids and things like that. Maybe the way in which that shrinks for you know, mothers who have had C-sections and the sort of postpartum scar. I don't advertise as scar work specifically, but we see that on the table. Very often when we're massaging over C-section scars, the appearance actually looks very different after a few sessions, because yeah, it's the internal and the emotional healing that is translating to the physical as well. So yeah, hopefully retreats in the future as well.
That's super helpful. And moving on to Princess, can you share more about the logistics of your sessions with clients and what that entails?
Sure. So my offerings, they also vary on price and type. Um, so for now, for the listeners, I'm also offering a free session if it's your first time with me, so we can see for a match. And then I would offer the different services based on what we talk about. And then sometimes we can work out like an affordable cost plan. So in terms of individual, like transformative life coaching sessions, that's 125 to 150. For the herbalism, it involves both the intake but also herbal preparation and shipping. So it's going to cost a little more, around 250. For the somatic womb alchemy sessions, that is a little bit of a longer session, 1 to 5 hours, for ceremony, and also to move at a slower pace. And then that costs from 125 to 150. And then for full body Ablon Hilot, that is sliding scale from 75 to 100. So I mentioned earlier that I'm also a licensed mental health clinician in New York. So if you're in New York and you want to process some of the traumas we talked about, I do take insurance. You could find which insurance I take under Psychology Today. Just search for my name, and that means the prices would range depending on your insurance. So if you have insurance, sometimes it could be $30 or it can be free depending on what you have. But if you want to do private pay, it's $175 per session. I also have this new monthly women's healing circle. So that's going to be a sliding scale from 40 to 75. And then I also have my signature 6-month plus program. I say plus because I say 6 months and sometimes it ends up being a year, depending on the clients and how slow we move or how fast we move. It's our Embracing Our Roots, Healing Across Generations program, which integrates all of the other services. We'll share more details about that soon if folks want to sign up for our email listserv or follow us on Instagram.
And then when it comes to potential group work or workshops or retreats, is that in the horizon for you or something that you offer now?
So the signature program, it depends on how many folks sign up. Like sometimes I've had to make it group because of my time capacity, and sometimes it's individual depending on the season. Workshops, if you follow us, we have them like it's not on a set schedule, so it really depends. Let's say like if there's a conference coming up, we might be a part of a conference, or if there's a community event. So it's kind of hard to tell at this time. We don't have anything else planned other than the services we mentioned. But if you do sign up for our email list and Instagram, then we usually promote what workshops we'll be doing in the future.
Very cool. So Instagram and email is just the way to go in terms of finding out future updates.
Mhm.
Very cool. And speaking of the future, what lies ahead for both of you as it relates to your work, and what is your hope for our Filipino community within the realm of womb care? We'll start with you, Princess, and move on to Jeanie.
Yeah, so I plan on continuing to just doing the work I was talking about. I love this work. It's my calling and my medicine to the world, healing through my own stuff and then turning that into medicine. And so continuing to hold space for folks, continuing to learn the healing arts, which for me is a lifelong thing. My hope for the Filipinx community, as the ancestors have said, is, to tell the truth and engage, or telling yourselves, like, what is your truth, right? All of it. Like to really see the parts of you that you may be ignoring, right? The parts that are the bad parts, the parts that, we tend to suppress, right? And to really allow ourselves to see all of those parts and tell the truth allows us to have more expansive view. And so a lot of these suppressed part want to be witnessed, and then that unlocks a lot of resources. And then also engaging in active love, as I mentioned, bell hooks, right? Like love is an action. And so what does that look like for each of you? Like reaching out to a healing arts practitioner, maybe, right? And so I think once we all do this, tell the truth about our whole selves, engage in the healing of ourselves and our communities, then we can collectively, and we need it, right, collectively tap into our inner brilliance and shift the frequency together. And I feel like we need to bring our secret gifts forward at this time. And I really do have faith that we can transform things. So, yeah.
I love that you said that what's being suppressed, once it comes into surface, can become resources, because that's such a good incentive for folks who are thinking about doing the work. And Jeanie, what about you? What lies ahead in the future for you, and what's your hope for the Filipino community within the realm of womb care?
Hmm. For my work, something that I really want to add to the repertoire in time is lymphatic drainage massage, because the lymphatic system is so important and so overlooked, and I really want to support folks with lipedema and lymphedema because I have lipedema, and yeah, I feel like more support is needed for people that live with that. Um, I think just in general, my work, I mean, I I have a full-time muggle job, as I call it, and this work is what I do from my home studio, from my home, just like my Lolo did. And, I want to really, there's part of me that would love to do it full time, but at the same time, I also love that this is something that I can offer to my community as accessibly as possible, where, they come to my home and they are looked after. And yeah, I think exactly what Princess said, it's a lifelong journey of learning and development, and, anything else that I can do in terms of training to elevate that experience for my clients, any knowledge or teachings that I can continue to invite in, I will do that as well. And yeah, I guess future me wants to sort of look back um, at this time of my life and the rest of my life and just remember all of the women and families I served, and hopefully created better outcomes for a lot of us, for our families, like in terms of like fertility and like preconception planning, for postpartum, and just, really giving women back their power in these really transformative times of their lives. And I hope when I'm a Lola, I can look back and see that impact, I guess. And what I really hope for our community in the realm of womb care is, yeah, I just feel like so many of us are really self sacrificing and so focused on caring and tending to others, whether it's partners, children, parents, friends. We're just, we show up. And do we show up that way for ourselves? Do we nourish this relationship, the longest relationship that we'll ever have in our lives and the most important one that we'll ever have with ourselves? Do we do that? More often than not, no. And my hope for our community is that we can step into that more, because the more that we step into that, the more seated in our power that we are, and the more that we can affect change in our community and globally. Because when we're not feeling confident, when we're not healthy, when we're not at our optimal functioning, we are not going to have the energy to show up for our communities in the way that we want to. So yeah, it's my hope is like, putting on your own life vest first. It's not about, putting everyone to the side and being selfish. You still got to show up for community. You've still got to sit in that discomfort of showing up when sometimes you don't want to, but just reserve some of that energy for yourself and your own healing and your own womb care as well.
Well, you're both already making that impact, just so you know. I know you want to see it more when you're a Lola, but the impact was already being made and we can all see it. And speaking of putting your own life vest first, being that we are a health and wellness podcast, we do typically ask our guests about their own wellness and self care practices. So, how do you practice self care or wellness outside of the womb care services that you provide for your clients? What do you do for rest and rejuvenation? We'll start with you, Princess, and move on to Jeanie.
Yeah, so every morning I engage in morning ritual in nature. And so I'm a bird watcher. I have a lovebird, and this really taught me behaviors of birds. And so now I look out, I'm just observing them. And like nature is such a powerful teacher. I know I went through the academic institution, but I found like nature is one of my most powerful teachers. And so that's also where I meditate, I journey to the ancestor realm. And so That's where I ask for guidance. Sometimes I'll sit at my altar. I have different altars around the house, depending, right? Like one in my kitchen, one in my room. The ancestor altar is outside of my room, right? Like, and so I'll sit there and I'll ask for guidance. I'll have like manifesting miracles or different intentions. I also practice, as I mentioned, the sacred martial arts. To me, it's kind of like embodying the warrior spirit, but also part of energetic hygiene practices. Like after a long day of holding space for everyone, I just need to let out some energy that may have not belonged to me, and doing martial arts really helps me to be present in my body, especially as someone who is still healing through complex PTSD. It's like my thing was dissociating from my body, and martial arts really helped me to come back to my body. Like you have to be present if you're sparring with someone, you'll get punched. And so it really helped me to be present. So I do that. I surf. And these activities I do it in community, right? And so I love being around my loving relations. I continue to journal whenever limiting beliefs come up because they do, and I'm human and I'm still bombarded with messages that I'm not enough. And so I have to constantly check them, right? And so I like to dance, again, moving that energy. But then I also like to laugh a lot. The ancestors, they always tell me like, relax, laugh, have fun. Like, I think sometimes I get too rigid because that might be my Capricorn rising where I'm like, everything has to be like this, and so then it becomes counterproductive, right, to our healing. And so, yeah, just like having fun, laughing. My partner, he's kind of a jokester, so he always makes me laugh. So, and he reminds me, like, just lighten up, be easy, right? Like our ancestors, even if they've healed or they've went through colonization, they've always had laughter, even in the most devastating times. And we can't forget about that of ourselves, our access to laughter.
Absolutely. And there's been several studies that show the benefits of laughter, even forced laughter, because the idea is your muscles don't know the difference. And if you force yourself to laugh, eventually you will laugh and it will still release all the stress hormones. And so, big, big fan of that. And what about you, Jeannie? What are some of your self care practices?
I have to echo a couple of things that Princess said. I love that you say that you're a bird watcher because we've got so many beautiful birds where I live because there's a forest not too far away. And I'm always looking for bird signs and like seeing eagles fly over. And, the art of noticing all of these little species that haven't shown themselves to me before and the ones that show up in pairs and all of that. I love sort of just seeing what I first see out of the house when I wake up in the morning and being like, okay, maybe that's my vibe for the day, whatever bird I see. And also, Princess, what you said about your partner keeping like things lighthearted and laughing because I have a funny husband and yeah, I feel like that is really nourishing, just having someone that you live with and share that closeness with where you're just bouncing off each other with like jokes all the time. And yeah, I think he really keeps things lighthearted for me because when you're a healer, when you're in any sort of these like healing arts or these acts of service for other people, I feel like if you choose to have a partner, they need to be someone that's like a really grounded earth, like on almost like a tree for you. Because you need someone to ground you. You need that person that's like solid so that you can show up and support other people. So I love that you mentioned that, Princess. And I am a big believer that practitioners need to receive to be able to give, as I mentioned before as well. And I have regular trusted practitioners in my area that I see for energy healing, osteopathy, homeopathy, pelvic occupational therapy, and how they sort of interweave with each other and are right for me. And recently, sort of like in the last year or two, have been really about sort of like ensuring my mobility for later in life because I think that's something that, yeah, we exercise to lose weight or we exercise for our present health. But what about, you know, when we go through menopause or when we are, elders. We need strength and we need mobility to keep showing up for ourselves. So I love reformer Pilates. And I'm very lucky where I live is wedged between the mountains and the sea. So saltwater therapy through ocean swims honestly cures everything. And yeah, love nature walks. In my own home, I love doing castor oil packs. I'm all about good quality supplementation and love a little bit of like herbalism as well. I'm not super knowledgeable, but I like to practice for myself. And yeah, like yoni steaming, all of that sort of stuff as well. And of course, self massage is a big feature. Um, yeah, that's it for me with self care.
Very cool. And I know we touched on this a little bit earlier, but can you both remind our community how to best reach you if they have any additional questions regarding what we've discussed today as related to womb care? We can start with you, Jeanie, then move on to Princess.
You can find me on Instagram at Ancestress or via email at jeanie@anakanancestress.com. I still don't have a website after over 3 years in practice, but all one-on-one or future community offerings will be either on my Instagram or my link tree, which is linktr.ee/Anakanancestress.
Thank you. And Princess, I know you mentioned Instagram and email. Can you share your handle and your email address with us too?
Sure. Yeah, you can reach me at info@luyahealing.com. And then at Luya Healing. So LUYAHEALING. You can visit my website, luyahealing.com. You can also call me at 323-508-3043. I usually won't answer because there's a lot of spam these days, but if you leave a message, I'll get back to you. You can also text that number. Yeah.
Thank you. And any final words? Is there anything else that you would want our global community to know when it comes to tending and nurturing for our wombs? And on that note, too, is there any advice that you might want to give our male identified allies? We can start with you, Jeanie, and move on to Princess.
Yeah, I mean, this could be a conversation for another day as well, but I think I want to say to any teens or younger people listening that it's never too early to be aware and care about your womb health and your fertility if you think that you want children one day, because there are a lot of things that we can do and a lot of things that we can avoid in youth that will be supportive when we are ready for that path. This goes for all genders because, a female is only 50% of the DNA, so everybody's got to be really mindful of that as well. And for our male identified allies, I would say try and familiarize yourself with, the seasons, like Princess said, in terms of the menstrual cycle. So, when a woman is bleeding, the menstrual phase, the follicular, and then the ovulatory, and then the luteal phase, because these women in your life travel through this each month, whether it's your partners, sisters, daughters, friends, and they will make so much more sense to you, you know, as to why maybe sometimes she just can't make a decision that day. Maybe she might need more alone time or more rest. Maybe why she at other times needs to frantically spring clean or reassess her life. And I would say as well, if you're becoming a parent and identify as male, please do your research on how to be a great birthing partner, advocating for your partner, and making sure that she has a nourished and rested postpartum.
I love that you mentioned the sporadic spring cleaning resonates so deeply. And Princess, on your side, any advice that you might want to give our community and our male identified allies?
Yeah. I remember I talked previously about in a different podcast about our original attachment wounds. So attachment wounds is like a whole thing in the mental health community, right? You have secure, insecure, or a mix of both, avoidant, and so for me, I talked about how our original attachment wound was our disconnection from the earth, right? How we treat the earth, how we treat ourselves. And so a part, of loving yourself, I think, is also like learning how to connect with the natural world around you. Like I mentioned earlier, and Gina mentioned earlier, one of our practices, we like to bird watch, right? We like to go out there, be with nature. So I would say, just some advice is go get off your phone, stop looking at the screen, maybe for like 10 minutes, and then go outside, or maybe put your phone away. And then the first thing you do is go out in nature, right? It's so grounding for you. It has like all the elements for you there. And so, that really helps your mental health a lot, and the energy it helps you when you walk. I learned like when you walk, it has like a pumping action like through your body, right? The circulatory system, the lymph, right? The energy. So just walk in nature. It's so helpful in so many different ways. And then in terms of male identified allies, I think that, uh, you know, males can also benefit from a lot of the practices that I talked about in terms of like slowing down to notice, your own patterns, tracking everything you consume and the impact on your body and the ways you show up in your relationships, right? Really meeting yourself, really listening and giving yourself what you need as well. Like also, how do you override yourself whenever there's like a boundary that you need to set, right? Or you see something oppressive happening and you want to speak up, but you don't because there's other men around and it's not cool to do it, right? And so, like, listening to yourself. And then also share the podcast to anyone in your life who has a womb. So, yeah, I would say that's the advice I would give.
Well, this has been an incredible conversation. Thank you both so much for talking to our community about womb care, tending, and nurturance. We are really excited to witness both of your journeys unfold, across the US, Australia, or wherever your paths end up taking you. And we definitely look forward to staying connected in partnership and sharing your upcoming opportunities with our global audience. And to our community, to launch our sixth season, we will be bringing to the podcast for the first time Bayou Barkada, a group focused on centering and uplifting the Philippine X communities in the New Orleans area, creating a cultural vibe of deeper connections through history, ancestral tours, artistic collectives, foods, and spirits. Stay tuned as this episode titled Louisiana Filipino X Healing Historical Fragmentation will air on Wellness Wednesday, April 15th, 2026. As we close, we'd like to acknowledge once again our guest speakers, Princess Manuel and Jeanie Smith, our creative lead, Richie, our video editor, Harmony Tangunan Kwan, our social media strategist and development coordinator, Kathleen Torrio, and our outreach manager, Maya Custodio. We also want to acknowledge our advisors, Alison De La Cruz, Rian De Los Reyes, and Safo Teologo, our community partners, SoCal Filipinos, the Filipino American Life, Rising Filipinas, Therapinay, and all of our community members for your shares and support. As always, you can find more about our guests and their offerings on our IG stories and saved in our highlights. You'll have permanent access to our upcoming events. Be sure to follow us on at Philippine X and Wellness on Instagram, Threads, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel on YouTube. And if you like what we're bringing to you and would like to see more, show us some love by buying us a coffee or take advantage of our offerings via our monthly membership on Patreon. Thank you so much for believing in us. Be well, everyone. Continue to take care of yourselves and others. Maraming salamat.
Salamat and
Salamat.
Mila
Thank
Buikas.
you.
Hello, everyone. Magandang araw. This is Sheena Katz and Mark King, and we are the hosts of Philippine X and Wellness, a podcast rooted in community, culture, and collective healing for the Philippine X community.
And today we are super excited to announce something we've been dreaming up for a while. We are launching our official Patreon.
This is your invitation to ride along with us. If our episodes have ever made you feel seen, witnessed, or naintindihan, then this is your space to be part of what keeps it going.
Your support on Patreon directly funds our ability to keep creating, covering production costs, bringing on more brilliant guests, and expanding what this community can be.
We've also created some very special offerings for our members, things like exclusive bonus contents, Filipino health and wellness products, invitations to live wellness events, digital resources, and more.
Whether you're joining for $1 a month or $20, know that every contribution fuels a movement, one where Filipino wellness is visible, centered, and celebrated.
So if you've been vibing with us, learning with us, and would like to see more, come join us on Patreon. Let's strengthen this movement together.
Maraming salamat.
Maraming salamat.